Happy Friday. I am so excited to be back with Mavens of Manufacturing Live. Today I have Kristin Carlson, and she is the president and owner of Peerless Precision, Inc. in Massachusetts. Kristin, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I'm really excited to have a conversation with you. But first, I would like to start off with, your background, where you're from, how you got involved with manufacturing, and maybe a little bit of information of what Peerless Precision is and some of the components you make.
Absolutely, Megan. It's really good to be here. I'm very excited about this. Let me back up. My father bought Peerless Precision in 1997 when I was 15 years old. He was a serial entrepreneur. We were living in Chicago at the time. He had started a vending company while we were living there, and also another business to help other entrepreneurs find the resources they needed to start their companies. While both did okay, weren't enough to feed my family of 6. So he looked into purchasing an established business, and he was looking in around Chicago so we wouldn't have to move. He was looking in New England because that's where my mother's family's from, and then in Virginia where his family lived. And he happened upon Peerless. The owner was looking to retire. The price was right. It had a lot of room for growth. So that, he bought it in 96, and then we moved out here in 97. And I was 15 years old. And I started my career with Peerless as the shop kid, sweeping floors and climbing into machines, getting the material scraps out, learning to cut material on a bandsaw. I went to college for a bit, and then when I came back, I did shipping and receiving and purchasing. So I got to learn all the part numbers we made. I got to start meeting our customers and our vendors, driving all over New England, making deliveries. At that time in my life, I was 21, living at home with my family, working with both my parents. All 4 of us were living at home, the kids. So I needed to leave for a little while and find out if I could make something on my own, of myself on my own. So I had friends who had moved to San Diego in 2003, and my husband and I went out to visit them in 2004 and then moved there in 2005. It was there I managed a warehouse for a gourmet cookware store and cooking school. So as a result of that, I'm a very good cook nowadays and have a very high-end taste in cookware in my kitchen. And then I proceeded to become a buyer for a fire alarm contractor. And I would deal with the fire inspectors at the city buildings, go on job walks, quote jobs, sales rep, service contract administrator. I learned to be an auto mechanic and self-taught IT person.
Wow.
So lots of hats, you name it. If they wanted someone to do it, I learned how to do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Well, people call me a Jane of all trades. I say I'm a Kristin of all trades because no matter what I do, I have to figure things out and be the best at whatever I'm doing. In 2009, my father had been diagnosed with colon cancer, and he had always wanted me in the position that I am now, but because he wanted me to do it, I didn't want to. Because I didn't want someone telling me something happened, and I had to figure it out on my own. So when he told me that he was diagnosed, he had asked me if something would ever happen, I would come home and help my mom either decide to keep the company or to sell it. And I said, absolutely. So after going through some surgery and chemo, he was given a clean bill of health. And then unfortunately, at the end of 2011, it came back metastasized and stage 4, and he was terminal. So in the spring of 2012, he asked me the question again. And I said yes without even thinking about it. My mom said he had forgotten the conversation we had had in 2009. And when I said yes, he almost fell out of his chair because he wasn't expecting that answer.
Oh.
So I moved back from California to Westfield. Longmeadow is where I grew up in August of 2012, and I've been running the company ever since then. So if I come to find out, my dad was right, and he knew what I was going to be good at.
So during that time when you were younger, did you feel like manufacturing was forced upon you, or was it something that you secretly enjoyed, or maybe not secretly enjoyed, but did like doing, you just didn't want to do it with your family at the time?
I don't know if I really had any solid feelings towards it when I was younger. They tried to teach me how to, like, one of the our previous foremen had set me up on a drill press to see how I could do, and I didn't enjoy it myself. Once I started learning what we actually did and what the parts we made went into, that's when I started liking it more, because then I knew what we were doing, and that what we make makes a difference in a lot of places. So it's one of those things that I've kind of grown into over time, and especially once I started, running the company. But back then I felt, it was family business here. Chris, come here and sweep floors. I'll pay you whatever dollars an hour. It's a job. You can start saving up for a car. So at the time, that's what it was for me in the beginning. But again, as I got into it more, my passion's really grown for it.
And I think you bring up an interesting point, because right now the sector, as everyone knows, and it's still a high top list item on most conversations that are happening in manufacturing, is the skills gap. And why is the skills gap still occurring? Why aren't people interested in manufacturing? Why are younger generations not thinking of manufacturing or engineering when they're in high school, college? And then what are some of the ways that we can work around that? And you brought up the word passion, and it wasn't something that was there for you in the beginning, but then when you started learning about your components and stuff, and when I first talked to you, you brought up a really interesting story of what Peerless makes and some of the components and where they go. And I really want you to touch on that story, because I think it's very interesting. And I think you're spot on. Like, we really need to start talking about manufacturing opportunities in a different way. And instead of just saying, hey, these are the opportunities, we really need to show younger generations why some of these components that companies are making are really important. So I want to start talking to you about the camera story that you shared with me, and what Peerless actually makes, the industries that it services, and some of the things that your components are going into, and share that story to hopefully attract younger generations, because I think the story is really cool, and it was actually a vital component to something that happened in our history. So can you share that story with us?
Absolutely. I'll kind of go through the whole spiel of Peerless, which that rolls into. So we're a precision machine shop, and we make small, complex mechanical components for the aerospace, defense, medical device, and commercial industries. So we work to extremely tight tolerances. So if parts are requiring tolerances between plus or minus 10,000ths of an inch down to plus or minus 5 millionths of an inch, that's where we're coming in, because we do a lot of CNC machining, and then maybe we'll finish machining to get those tight tolerances. That is important in the aerospace and defense work we do. With aerospace, we're making components that go into the engines, fuel injection systems, hydraulics, and landing gear assemblies. On the defense side, we make components that go into the firing mechanisms for smart missile systems for the U.S. Navy on their submarines. And also, we are one of 3 critical component suppliers in New England to manufacturing parts that go into the cryogenic submicro cooling systems for thermal imaging, night vision, and infrared cameras. So that one of those cameras in 2013, some gentleman bombed the Boston Marathon. And I remember the state being shut down for about a week. I was actually driving out to see the specific customer the day they were on their manhunt. So I've never seen the Mass Pike, which is the main highway that goes east to west, as empty as I had that day. When they found the bomber, he was hiding underneath a tarp in a boat in Watertown, Massachusetts, not too far out of Boston. They found him using a mounted thermal imaging camera that was on the bottom of a police helicopter. When I saw the video of that, I saw my customer's logo on there. And if anyone watching this has ever watched Ghost Hunters, if you're in the military, you've probably seen these cameras because these are on every police helicopter. They're on firefighter equipment. They're on all the naval ships. They're on sniper scopes that go overseas. So when I saw the video, the next day I called my customer, our strategic sourcing manager, and I said, "Hey, I saw this video, and it's awesome that one of your cameras found the bomber. Do you think there's a possibility that parts that we made at Peerless were actually in that camera that helped to find him?" And he told me he'd get back to me because he had to look it up because we serialize everything for traceability. So if our parts were in there, he would know. And come to find out, he calls me back and he said, "Yep, parts that you made were in the camera running the cryogenic cooling system that found the Boston Marathon bomber." So it's stories
awesome.
like that. It's stories like that that we as manufacturers have to share in order to get kids or even adults that are looking for a career change interested in what we do. Because you can walk into my shop and see any of the little metal parts that we make. You're not going to have any idea what they go into. Most of the time I don't, unless I start asking questions. So if we're able to share with the students or the adults what the end use of what we're doing, or if there's something amazing that happened with a part that we made that went into another assembly. One of my customers, unfortunately, I don't have parts that were in there, but one of my customers was behind making the camera or microscope or where it was that ended up being able to capture the first pictures and videos of a black hole a few years ago.
Wow.
I can tell stories so my shop's in Westfield, Mass, and we've got about 40 other machine shops in that state. The backbone of Westfield is advanced manufacturing. We've got a great technical school that most of my new hires come out of. When you look up into the sky at any airplane or helicopter, there is at least $50,000 to $100,000 worth of parts that came out of Westfield. So
That's
planes
awesome.
and helicopters flying without what we do where my company's located. So it's up to us to be able to explain what we do and find a way to make those connections or make it relatable so people understand how important it is to have the manufacturing base that we do in the United States.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree with that. The company that I work for now, PhotoFab, they do photochemical etching for smaller parts. And I never knew that photochemical etching was a thing. I hear chemical engineering and I'm thinking, people that make chemicals for things that are very good for our environment, but they're also used for other ways like machining thin metal parts. And we make so many small components for some of the same applications that you're talking about. And I feel like younger generations, and not just younger generations, adults too, kind of take for granted some of the things that they're using because they don't really understand the whole entire process that's involved making that larger component. There's so many different things that go into one product. And I just thought it was really cool that, with that story, especially because I remember watching that marathon, hearing about it. The place that I worked at back in 2013, when the bombing actually happened, one of our coworkers was actually running the marathon. And we were so afraid because we didn't know if he crossed the finish line or not. We had no idea where he was at. And he actually crossed the finish line 10 minutes before the bombs went off. So it was just,
oh my goodness.
It really hit home. And, seeing that whole process take place from, the time the bombing happened to putting the pieces together to catch the actual bombers, and then seeing that same video that you described where they caught the guy under the tarp in the boat, and then hearing your story and making that connection. I just got goosebumps when you were telling me when we initially started talking, and I was just like, see, no one knows, the behind the scenes of some of these parts that we're using, and I really feel like we need to start talking about those more. And you and I had an initial conversation before this one that we're having now, and you had some thoughts on what's contributing to the skills gap. So I would like to hear some of that today. What do you think are the biggest contributing factors to the skills gap, and what is Peerless doing as a company within your community to help close that gap? What are some of the things that you're working on?
Sure. So, I mean, the biggest issue is an awareness issue, just like we were just talking about. It's a lot of machine shops. The manufacturing is still viewed as that dark, dirty, dingy place to work. What people refer to as your father's or your grandfather's shop before we had more environmental regulations to keep everyone honest and safe. Um, there's the view of, if you go to a trade school or a vocational school, it's because you're not cut out for college. And we've had a big push over the past few decades where it's been college or bust, and I'm a result of that too. My father who bought a manufacturing company refused to let any of us go to a trade school, and if you don't go to college, you're not going to be able to make anything of yourself, and it's not the right message to be sending to people. Because later on, towards towards the end of his life, we had a long conversation about how he wished he had moved us to Westfield and told us we could have gone to a vocational school, because some people learn better doing. One of those people. I'd rather figure things out and tinker around and learn hands-on than sitting in a classroom with someone lecturing me about things. A lot of, especially in Massachusetts, and I'm sure this is similar in a lot of places around the country, but you saw like shop class going away from middle school and high schools. You started seeing a lot of the electives, shop, art, home ec, all those were going to the wayside because now it's more important to teach to the test. And if that works, that's great, but it doesn't work for everyone. And we're not doing a good job at exposing young people to all the opportunities that are out there, because you can make a lot out of yourself. You can become big and important and very successful without a college degree, as long as you've graduated high school and you've got that attitude to learn and grow and just be eager to become something more than you are. We've also got the view that everything gets made overseas in China, Taiwan, or India. And our industry did see that a lot in the late 90s, early 2000s with offshoring. But what happened was a lot of things started coming back because there were issues with delivery times and, quality certifications. Was the material actually what they say it is? And now robots are the threat. Because I've been inside of a vocational school at an open house with students from other departments telling kids that that we're interested in manufacturing, don't go over there. Robots are going to steal your jobs. And, it's changing those perceptions. Robots aren't going to steal anyone's job. It's going to offer a new training opportunity for a machinist or an operator to learn how to program those robots to make their lives easier so they can focus more on the important tasks and not just pushing buttons and unloading and loading parts.
Right.
I work with a lot of schools. My door is always open to students and teachers who want to come and tour the shop so that I can actually show the kids and share the story about the Boston Marathon bomber or what we do for airplanes. I mean, we make parts, they're matched valve and sleeve sets that go into fuel injection systems that have a diametrical clearance of plus or minus 20 millionths of an inch. And, when I explain that to them, I'm like, that's like taking one of your hairs. And I have very thin hair, so mine's a great example because you can't see it anyway. And I'm like, you take one of my really thin hairs, you stick like 1,000 times down the center. I'm like, and then you're starting to get close to millionths of an inch. So they say, oh my, and I say, if it's off by even a little bit, that plane's either not going to fly because the fuel's not flowing or it's flowing too freely, and you don't want to be on that plane. I'm like, so rest assured, if you're flying on a plane with parts that came out of our shop, you're good to go. So it's, in Westfield, we have an organization, or I guess a group. It's called the Westfield Education to Business Alliance, or WeTuba, and it's led by the Westfield Chamber of Commerce, and it partners with the public school system. And they go and grab local business owners, and we're allowed to adopt classrooms. So I joined that about 2 years ago, and I've adopted a 5th and 6th grade math class. And when there's not a pandemic raging, I go in and teach a class one day, and I get to share. I bring parts in, pass them around. They get to touch them. I explain what they're doing, what they are. We talk about how you will use math in the real world, and this is how. And trust me, I used to think I wouldn't, and you do. And then after I go and teach that class, they come in and do a few days of shop tours so that they can come in and see. I also work with an organization called Right Flight, and it's also a middle school group, and students that get accepted into the program, they end up they're really in it because they get to fly a plane out of our local municipal airport or do a simulator or something at the end of it. But they go and they touch on every aspect of what it takes to make that goes into planes. So we bring these Right Flight programs into our shop for tours then, and I'll have about 10 to 15 kids. And if 2 of them leave and they say they're excited about manufacturing, then I think I've done a good job, because it's people, now they're thinking about it, but now they might go home and talk to their parents. I've had parents reach out to me after they've come to tours and thank them so much, and they didn't know this was an option, and they want to, their kids going into manufacturing. Sometimes I'm lucky enough where we do, they've all been virtual tours lately, but a virtual tour at my shop, right afterwards, they go to the airport for a tour. So now all of a sudden, they've talked to a shop that makes parts that go into engines and hydraulics for these planes, and now they're seeing the planes and talking to the guys that maintain them.
That's awesome. I think it's interesting too with like the AR and VR opportunities that are out there. You mentioned simulations, and I think, I have a nephew who is on the autism spectrum. He has the Asperger's, and he was diagnosed when he was like 3. And one of the things that he enjoys doing and loves doing is video games. And he wants to be a video game engineer, but I've been talking to him about, some of the things that are coming up in manufacturing, and it piqued his interest. And he was like, well, why would they need video games in manufacturing? And I'm like, well, it's not like a video game, but it's similar things where you use like CAD or something, and you're designing space for these augmented realities or virtual realities, and you then can use that for training and stuff. And he was like, I might need to look into that. So it's just, kind of twisting things and like showing the other opportunities that could come from something. And I think video gaming is an interesting thing because a lot of kids are involved in it now, and they're using it either on their phones or they're, and parents sometimes get worried about that stuff, but it does teach them a lot of hand-eye coordination, but also like design things too. So I'm like always trying to find those, different opportunities within those things, because I feel like if we can make that connection somehow or some way with what they really enjoy doing in their free time, that can also help tip them over the edge to come into manufacturing or engineering. With these tours,
if your nephew's like that, he's probably going to make a great programmer someday.
Yeah, I think so. It's funny because he has this plan already drawn out. Like he talks about working at McDonald's for a certain time, and then once he's done with that, he's like, I'm going to go to college for video game engineering, and then I'm going to make lots of money being a video game engineer. So it's really cool to see it from that end. And I think the reason why I'm so passionate about sharing his story is because there are a lot of kids who might have a special need or something, and they learn differently. And that doesn't mean that they're not suited for manufacturing or engineering. It just means that the way their mind works could be applied somewhere else within the sector. So that's why I really like having conversations with him, because he does see the world differently, and he thinks things differently, and he problem solves differently. And I just think it would be really cool to have someone like him.
Yeah, I'd encourage, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but there's this project or this organization called the Uniquely Abled Academy. And it's mostly in California. It's mostly in California, but it usually starts with community organizations, parents or relatives of family members who are on the high end of the spectrum, like your nephew. It actually specifically targets folks with Asperger's syndrome. And they're working on this on the eastern side of my state right now, but it is specifically designed and set up to train young adults with Asperger's to become machinists. And
That's really
because
cool.
there's the founder is very aware of how they operate at a different level, and he might have had a relative, I'm assuming, with Asperger's. And so if you just Google Uniquely Able Project or Uniquely Abled Academy, you'll see testimonials from the companies that have hired the graduates of these programs. And because they are so laser focused on what they're doing, they rise to the top in no time. They're getting promotions within 6 months to a year. It's just amazing. So
That's awesome.
there's no right or wrong person who can be in manufacturing. It's how your mind works. It's your attitude. It's your aptitude for mechanics.
Right. I agree. So with all of these things that you're doing especially with tours and connecting with these students with the Adopt the Math class, in your personal experience, how many girls are involved in these opportunities? And if you're having conversations with them specifically, what are some of the things that you guys are talking about? And do they have any hesitations for entering something within manufacturing and engineering? And what have those hesitations been for them, specifically for women?
Yeah, so the concentration of young women and girls in the tours or the classes that I see, it varies every year. I actually did a career day at a local comprehensive high school a few years ago, and the entire graduating class for the manufacturing department was all female. There wasn't a single boy in there. And I almost fell out of my chair when they told me that. I was like, oh my God, how did you do this? Can I have all of them?
That's awesome.
Please. So, I mean, I've actually kind of put in perspective how we're evolving and getting rid of that gender gap or that gender line that you can only, manufacturing isn't for girls. You can't be an auto mechanic for girl, if you're a girl. That's not what you do. I always call BS on that, and I tell that straight to the kids. I don't sugarcoat things because they need to hear it from someone.
Yeah.
So in 2012, when I came back to start running the company, there were three women in the shop. One was in shipping and receiving, and the other two were my mom and myself. Fast forward to today, we have three women in the office, one in inspection, and 4 on the shop floor out of 28 people. So we have eight women employees out of 28.
That's awesome.
I am such a strong, a role model, which my mom and I kind of laugh about when people call me a role model, because I never would have seen myself that when I was a kid. So schools and training programs, when they have women graduates, they reach out to me to see if I have an opening and want to place them at my shop because they know they're going to succeed and grow there. So, a lot of the concerns from young women and girls is that my parents say that I can't work in manufacturing because that's not what I should do, or there's a lot of boys in there, they're all old, or how I don't think I'm going to be good at it because I've never been exposed to it. And I go, do you like playing with Legos? Do you like do you like to bake? Do you like to make things? Do you like or do you, everything you do, is it stereotypical of being a female or not? I'm like, it's 2021 or whatever year I'm talking to them. There's no more room for that gender divide. It's we're not where we were a long time ago. And and I say from experience, women have pay a lot more attention to detail. They're a little bit better at thinking outside of the box and coming up with solutions to problems that some other people might not be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel of. Because we think differently than our male counterparts gives us an edge. And we're willing to try new things, experiment, take companies to a different level, or do things, suggest things to be done on the shop floor that end up saving a lot of money that no one else would have thought of. I mentored a couple of sophomores in high school out of there. It was a traditional high school that I helped, gave them bring in a a manufacturing and engineering pathway. And I help out the schools a lot, and I was mentoring, and it was three sophomores. I think they were all 15, and one of them, her family, her dad and her brother were mechanics, auto mechanics, and she grew up tinkering on cars in the garage with them, doing all that. I can't change a tire, but I know she could change all four of mine and probably fix my entire engine. She told her dad that she wanted to go to become a mechanic, and he said, nope, that's not a girl's job. But she had grown up tinkering on those cars in the garage with her dad and her brother. And she was told no, she couldn't do that because of what was between her legs. And I looked at her and I was just like, that's BS. I'm like, you can do anything you want to. I'm like, you don't want you to do that because it's threatening to them. I scare a lot of men because I'm very, vocal and domineering, and I'm very set, I'm a strong, independent woman. And there's a lot of, not everyone's like that. Not everyone cowers back from that type of personality, but it's, it can be very threatening to a lot of people. When someone, especially in, the industry of auto mechanics or manufacturing, where you're not used to seeing women in the shop. I've seen and experienced power struggles with some of my older employees. And it's, they look at you as a threat sometimes. And, and it's hard. And you got to tell them too, like, look, this is a shop environment. Sensitive ears need not apply. You need to have some thick skin to do this. You need to be able to throw it back at them just as much as they give it to you, because once they warm up to you, you're going to be part of the shop and you be ready for it.
Well, and I think that's one of the challenges too. It's been such a male-dominated sector for so long. I think when women like yourself come into the picture and you don't have a filter, I don't know if they're threatened by it or they're just like, how do we react? Like, how do we react? Because you also have that challenge where men don't want to come across as, like they're insulting women or like sexually harassing or whatever. So there's kind of that awkwardness still that exists where, when women like yourself come into the picture, they might not just know how to react to it because they're like, crap, if I shoot it back at her in this way, I might get in trouble for being offensive or something like that. So there is still that stage of awkwardness to the newness of women coming into some of these positions where they might not have been in before. And I think you did touch on something really important where parents, aren't part of these conversations. And I think that's where we need to start diving in more too, as well as not just having high school counselors and teachers and students involved in these conversations, but we need to start bringing in parents as well too, and letting them know, because I was in a similar situation. My mom wanted me to be a lawyer. I'm like, no, thanks. Or, something like a doctor or something. And I'm just like, I don't have any interest in that whatsoever. I was always afraid of engineering because I'm terrible at math. I still use my fingers to count. I've mentioned that many times before. And as a writer, I never thought there would be space for me in the manufacturing or engineering sector as a writer until I started learning more about technical writing. And there's so many opportunities there. So I think parents definitely need to be more involved in these conversations and also shown what a career pathway looks like. And there just needs to be a connection with in between the dots, figuring out what your student has a passion for, what your child has a passion for, and then seeing where that passion fits within manufacturing, because guaranteed there's room for that passion. It's just figuring it out and finding it, where it fits. One example is I had a conversation with a woman, and she was telling me that a student that came in to her manufacturing facility had a passion for medical, but because he wanted to be in medical, he assumed that it was either as a nurse, a surgeon, or some type of doctor. And then they showed the additive manufacturing capabilities that they had and how they were making prosthetics for amputees, especially veteran amputees who lost all of their limbs because, they got hit by an IED or something. And he was completely blown away. He had no idea that even existed. So then he got involved with additive manufacturing, and now that's something that he does for a career. And I was like, that's so awesome. Like, you don't have to be a medical surgeon, to be involved in medical. You can do something within manufacturing that provides for the medical industry and still make a difference that way. So I think you're hitting on all the right points.
Yeah,
it was awesome.
There's so much more to manufacturing. There's the, it's like there's so many aspects of manufacturing. You can get into manufacturing without actually being a machinist if that's not what you want to do. Right. There's programming, there's purchasing, there's estimating, there's accounting. We need bankers, we need insurance agents, and real estate people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's such a connected ecosystem. And again, I tried being a machinist briefly. Wasn't for me. I'm better on the office end of things. I'm better at delegating and telling people what to do, and just focusing on the business and not being in the business. I'm sales. I'm marketing. I'm HR. I'm the complaint department, chief cook and bottle washer, pretty much. And I love that. And just because I don't enjoy myself the actual act of making things. At least on machines. I mean, I'm creative. I crochet, I bake, I pickle and can all the time. So I like making things, just not on big machines. And but it's the respect, the admiration, the awe that I have for those that's what they're suited to do, and they found their passion in that. It's just it's inspiring, especially when you find someone who wants an opportunity, comes in, and they just start as general help in the shop, and they start asking that extremely question of what else can I do to help. And then once you start asking that question to a supervisor or manager or something, they're like, oh my God, no one ever asked me if they can do anything else to help. Let me teach you how to read a blueprint, or let's go to this training class, and now you're going to become a machinist, because that's where we need help right now.
That's awesome. Well, our time is coming to an end. Kristin, is there anything else that you would like to add to our conversation before I let you go for the weekend?
It's I love what I do. I love where I ended up, even though I took the long road. Anyone out there listening, whether you're young or old, I didn't take a straight path to where I get here, to get to where I am now. So it's okay to not know what you want to do and explore and test things out and figure that out. There isn't any right or wrong. I did a lot of stuff that I was supposed to do growing up. I was told to do it. This is what you're going to go to college for. This, you're going to do this, this, and this. And I fought it. And I think I would have been better off if I had a little bit more freedom to figure myself out. So just, it's okay. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but what I'm doing right now is, so much fun, and I really enjoy it. So find out what you're passionate about and go with it.
I think that's a great point, because especially now with my daughter being a senior, I always used her as a case study, because she herself and her friends are trying to figure out what they want to do for the rest of their life. And I always try to emphasize that you have time. You have time. You don't need to go to college right away. Take a year off, take 5 years off, travel the world, get yourself involved in other world experiences, because that's how we learn how to solve problems. We see where the challenges are, not just within our nation here, but all over the world. There's countries that don't have clean water. There's countries that are suffering from food shortages. There's countries that don't have, consistent running power. Like, what are some of these solutions that we can provide for them to provide those simple things that we take for granted here because we have them all the time. So I think you bring on really good points. So thank you so much again for joining me here on Mavens of Manufacturing. If anybody wants to learn more about Peerless Precision, I'm sorry, where should, sorry about that. Where should they go?
So our website is peerlessprecision.com, PEERLESS, precision, and then .com. We're also on LinkedIn, and we have a Facebook page as well. And I'm on LinkedIn also.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kristin. I appreciate it. Everyone that joined us for today's episode of Mavens of Manufacturing, thank you so much. We have another episode scheduled for next week. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.
All right. Thank you.
This episode of Mavens of Manufacturing has been sponsored by Z Ink Solutions. Z Ink Solutions. This isn't your grandmother's copywriting service. We provide copywriting and copy editing services that provide impactful text and memorable storytelling for a variety of brands and industries. Contact us today at zincssolutions.com. That's z-inksolutions.com.